Okay, so delighted to be joined by the Independent senior football correspondent, Melissa Reddy. Her upcoming book is entitled Believe Us, How Jurgen Klopp Transformed Liverpool into Title Winners, and is available for pre-order now. There it is. Melissa, congratulations on the project. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. The book has just arrived, so about 10 minutes ago, I had it in my hands for the first time and got to see it. And wow, all those sleepless nights, the stress. I had the shortest deadline ever to produce it. So while I was actually producing it, I spoke to a lot of the writers that I look up to, and I asked them about the process, and they told me it's going to be absolutely horrible. They were not wrong. But they also told me that when you get the book in your hands, it makes everything worth it, and they were not wrong about that either.
And how was the process? That's interesting that you mentioned it was a quick turnaround, because I was going to ask, was a Klopp Liverpool book something you always had in the pipeline? But when did it all come together? When did the wheel start turning?
I've always had in my head, because I've specialized in long form features, that all that insight and stuff should actually be turned into a book. But I had no idea where to start. Obviously, you do things like pitches and stuff, but who do you pitch to? When do you have the time to pitch? Because football is so relentless, there's hardly ever a break. And weirdly, after Liverpool had won the title, I was sitting and thinking, gosh, like, because I had to again produce like long forms on how they did it, what all the steps were since Klopp came in. And I remember sitting there thinking, this really should all be a book. And the next morning, I got an email from HarperCollins asking me if I would be interested in writing a book, or what my concept would be. And because I thought about it for so long, I had everything ready to go in terms of concept, chapters, information. Uh, so yeah, I was quite confident that I could pull it off with a short deadline, which was a month.
Hmm. A
While
month.
the
Wow.
season, I know the season was still ongoing as well, so I had to carry on doing my job for the indie, work on the book. The players had only a 2 week break, so when they were on break, they obviously didn't want to do any interviews. Getting Jurgen to speak was also quite difficult. Also, the added complication with coronavirus, so you have to do everything virtually. But yeah, honestly, when I had it in my hand, it just made everything worth it.
And you mentioned obviously Liverpool, the beat in Liverpool would be your main source as well. But how different is the process of writing a book as opposed to those long-term features that you would normally specialize in?
I think with the long form features, in your head, you're aiming for about 6,000 words, between 4,000 to about 6,000. And so your mind is trained to be as detailed as possible, but also not go overboard. So you need to make people feel they need to get wrapped up in the story without ever getting bored through that process. So it has to be quite rapid. With the book, you have to be very, very detailed. Everything has to be explained, because you're writing with the intention that you might not be speaking to a Liverpool fan or even a football fan. It might be somebody interested in leadership because of Jurgen Klopp's ability with that. And so you have to really break everything down. It's a lot more difficult. It's Somebody said to me, why don't you approach every chapter as writing a long form article? And I thought, yeah, that sounds manageable in my head, but it actually doesn't work out that way.
And I mentioned there that you've covered the Liverpool beat for a long time as a journalist, and you were just talking about the details in this book. Were there any details that struck you, even as a regular on that beat, like doing this book? Did you come across anything that you weren't even aware of?
Yeah, so speaking to the players, obviously you knew that in the period leading up to Jurgen Klopp taking over, everything was so toxic. There was a break in unity between the fans and the club, but also behind the scenes between the key figures. There was no alignment. You knew that dual policies in terms of transfers and stuff were at play. But I don't think you realize the psychological impact it had on everyone. Like speaking to staff and the players, where they felt they dreaded match days. They didn't want to go out on the pitch because they knew that every misplaced pass was going to get booed because the fans were no longer on board. They knew that the manager, Brendan Rodgers, his job was on the line, which is something very uncomfortable for players to deal with, knowing that they're impacting somebody else's livelihood. And just the weight of expectation and pressure that was on them for the title draw. Like, they say that you wake up every day and you know Liverpool haven't won the title for so long, and it's on you to do it. And if you lose 2 games, it's the end of the world, because it's not the season that Liverpool wins the title. And they were saying it's quite difficult. You play within yourselves because you actually don't want to make a mistake. So that was one element, to actually get the level of depth into how players felt at the time and how much work Klopp had to actually do when he got in. And then the other details, which are really, really great, is, his ability to deliver messages. So I think because of his personality, people always paint him as this Hollywood guy, massive speeches at halftime or before a game or after a game. And somebody who, because he's quite emotional, somebody who reacts to emotion when he's got to communicate, or somebody who can, blow up when a game's not going his way in terms of in the dressing room. And it's actually not like that at all. Everybody I spoke to said one of his key talents is the ability to find the right words at the right moment and the right delivery. Jordan Henderson was saying he's never seen anything like it, and it makes such a big difference. And Henderson said, actually, in the lowest moments, so when the team have had a really poor performance or a really massive disappointment, like losing League Cup final, Europa League final in 2016, then the Champions League final in 2018, he said that's when the manager really comes to the fore, because everyone's on the floor, and that's the hardest time to try and coax any sort of positivity or anything, but he always manages to do it. I think in terms of every chapter, there was quite a bit that I hadn't known, despite covering the club intensely leading up to his arrival. And even after interviewing him so many times, interviewing him for this book was different. And he had also said many things I didn't hear. And I think people reading it will really get stuck in when he describes how he felt when, the whistle goes in the Chelsea-Manchester City game and Liverpool are confirmed as champions, when he describes everything that happens around that. I think there might be a few tears.
And just, you mentioned that the interview was slightly different to ones you would have done with him previously. Do you think that was something to do with the weight being off his shoulders, as you mentioned about the 30 years of waiting, or was it more of an individual thing on his behalf?
I think it was more, he does not ever like to reflect. It's just not in his nature. Even when we spoke to him directly after Liverpool won the league in terms of the local pack, he was already talking about how do we attack the next season. We don't want to defend the title. We're going to attack. We can't get lazy. We're still ambitious. We have to have the right attitude, because for him, once it's done, it's done. It's actually the same with, the major defeats, which is why Liverpool are able to recover so well, and why he, in a personal capacity, is able to recover so well, because he never gets too high or too low. But because it was for the book, because we were breaking down his time, he could actually be reflective, and you could see that he was thinking about things deeply for the first time in terms of looking back. So when we spoke about 2016, he was like, oh, yes, oh, yeah, I remember that. Oh, that completely slipped my mind. There were, because he doesn't really dwell or hasn't had the time to absorb things. That was one part. The relief did come up, and he said it felt different. Obviously, winning the Champions League final in 2019 was huge. The parade was unlike anything he'd ever seen. But he said the feeling of the league title, having known what it meant to the club, the supporters, knowing how long the wait was, and also given the fact that the season was interrupted by coronavirus and for a long time felt like it wasn't going to be completed. So all of that, he did say, made it feel all the more important and special.
You mentioned a couple of staging posts there early in his 5-year reign. Is there anyone in particular that you thought, right, Liverpool are back on the right track here? It was a little bit of a false down with Brendan Rodgers, even though he got them close to his title. But did you ever have a moment in your head where you thought Liverpool might actually be title contenders in the near future?
In the first game, so yeah, it's 5 years since his first game in charge, which was against Tottenham, a goalless draw. And in that game, it was just straight off the back of an international break. He had so many injuries to deal with. Danny Ings suffering the ACL, Joe Gomez as well, Roberto Firmino was unavailable. So he didn't really have much to work with in terms of his top talent. Had a very limited period of time because the players weren't there when he joined the club. They were all on international duty. And he was facing, at the time, the hardest working, hardest running, hardest pressing team in the division, and actually probably the best team to watch as well, along with Manchester City, Maurizio Pochettino, Spurs. And in that game, the way Liverpool played out of possession, without the ball, so how they counter-pressed and how they outran Spurs, given everything that was against him, time, injuries and all that stuff, you could tell, whoa. And then you're thinking, okay, maybe it's just the new manager effect. They kind of have to listen. Everyone's playing for a chance to have a future under him. And then you go and it's Manchester City away and Liverpool go through a spell where they absolutely blow them apart. Stamford Bridge away. So in the big battles against the top six, you could see that Liverpool in transition were going to be an incredible force, just needing to nail down their offensive protection. And then you had the Europa League run, where Borussia Dortmund in that tournament were favorites to win it. They had a phenomenal squad, really offensive, and they were troubling teams in that competition with ease. And when Liverpool drew them, Liverpool were the underdogs. And I remember that game at Anfield, and when Borussia Dortmund, got the early ascendancy and stuff, the way they managed to transform that game, like use the power of the crowd, believe that they could score still at the death, that was huge. The game against United as well in the Europa League. So already the first 6-7 months, you could see the building blocks to something special. Obviously, the big change comes when there is investment in the defense, because the players, and speaking to them for the book, said they always felt they could hurt teams in patches. They always felt they could, suffocate you in possession, win the ball, go and score a quick goal, and do that a few times. But that they were always liable to let in a few as well. And they started working on game management before Virgil van Dijk was signed. But when he joined, that was just solidified, because people are looking around now and they've got this incredible central defender, and then one of the best goalkeepers in the world joins. So the players look around in the dressing room and think, it's okay going forward. We've got them at the back now.
Yeah, and just in those initial couple of months, because it's interesting, the Liverpool board made the move to extend his contract by about 6 years, just within a few months of him arriving. So that kind of spoke to how much confidence they had in him. And it was a little bit at odds with how he started, in the sense that I remember there was a little bit of scorn around the 2-2 draw at West Brom, and people were a little bit sceptical about taking the bow in front of the Kop and all that kind of stuff. But I was reading your piece in The Independent today, and you spoke to the fact that his adversity he faced in his life and career prior to Liverpool kind of spoke to that, how resolute he became at Liverpool, that he was never going to be knocked by either talk outside the club or stuff on the pitch. He was always going to believe in his philosophy, more or less.
Yeah, the ownership, before they'd actually met him in New York, had a 60-page dossier on him, which extended beyond like his training sessions and stuff. They spoke to people that had worked with him at Mainz, at Borussia Dortmund. They spoke to former players, just about what he is like as a person, how he, and the biggest thing actually for them was how he handles the difficult moments, because Liverpool at that stage needed to go through a lot of difficult moments to get out the other side of it. So everyone had watched his Borussia Dortmund team. They were exciting, they were energetic. As a neutral, you always wanted Borussia Dortmund to win. He made them super cool, but they were also a super serious football side. And so they didn't want all the information that was already readily available. They went really deep, and the season at Dortmund they paid the most attention to was his last one, which was obviously the most disappointing one. They were flirting with relegation before the winter break. And what they'd actually seen is that the underlying numbers showed that the results and the performances weren't correlating. So it was unfortunate. But even how he handled that season where pretty much everything went against Dortmund, results, injuries, and the fact that it was, every single season they used to lose their best players to football's apex predators, and to have to continuously have this rebirth and to shake things up while losing your best players. After a while, I think you can do it for a season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons. After a build-up, it gets quite taxing. But how he handled that really impressed them. And, that contract that you spoke about, 8 months in, giving him a 6-year deal, it was heavily criticized at the time. It was even criticized massively by Liverpool fans who thought, why are you rushing into things? But behind the scenes, remember I spoke about the psychology, just the states, how everything was divided and in disarray. No one was really happy going into Melwood and stuff. In those early months, it wasn't just that they could see the games that we're talking about, City, Chelsea away, the Europa League run. They could also see what was happening behind the scenes, how staff were all pulling in the same direction, how the vision was so clear in terms of recruitment, in terms of what's going to happen with the academy, in terms of identity on the pitch. And one of the things he did early on was make social gatherings regular and also open to all staff. So previously, if you were really important in the football hierarchy, you would get invited. But regardless of whether you worked at Melwood or not, you would have to be of a certain stature to get invited to these get-togethers with Klopp. No, it was janitor, kitchen staff, drivers, everyone. If you're working at the football operation, if you're based at Melwood, you got invited. So behind the scenes, lots of good things were brewing, and that's why they gave him that deal.
And we got a little bit of an insight. I don't know what your read on the Roy Keane thing a couple of weeks ago on Sky Sports, when he had Roy Keane implied that they were sloppy, and he didn't take too kindly to that. But that sort of speaks to the public perception of Klopp, that he's very vibrant character and gets involved. He's engaged basically with everything that's going on around his team. The fact that he's able to keep that harmony behind the scenes would suggest that he's a different character away from the cameras. Is that fair to say, or what's your read on Klopp as a person?
Yeah, I think he can't actually hide his emotions well when he is in front of the camera. So if he's annoyed with a question, You'll know it if he's annoyed with a comment, like you mentioned, the Roy Keane one. You will know it. He does not filter himself, and he doesn't say things that he doesn't mean or believe in. Often, obviously, directly after a game, it's impacted by whatever emotion he's feeling. So he might not mean things exactly as he says it, but you're still getting him the unfiltered version. But in terms of the strategic side of football, so not when he's answering our media or fan related matters, when he's dealing with the players, when he's dealing with the backroom staff, with the club's hierarchy, he is, they say, obsessive with the details. He is calm, he is measured. When I was saying to you earlier, Henderson saying he's never seen a talent like that, the way the manager picks the right words all the time. So he's a lot more chilled than I think we, in general terms, than we would ordinarily know, because we're seeing him in the immediate aftermath of a game having to react to it. And having to react to it a few times. He does like a series of TV interviews, then a series of radio interviews before he does his press conference. So at that time, he doesn't really want to speak to anyone. And actually, one of the other things I learned from the book is that he doesn't do post-match talks with the team, whether they win, lose, draw. It doesn't really happen. He always waits to watch the game again, to fully analyze everything, to get a proper reading, because he's operating off emotion when he's watching it. So he wants to have a clearer view before he speaks to them.
And there's nothing to suggest that he's going anywhere anytime soon. He's deeply in love with the city by all accounts. The age profile of the team is a little bit older than when he took over, in terms of it's been a consistent group for a couple of years, but he's constantly refreshing that. The likes of Jota coming in adds a bit of vibrancy to the front line. But if he does leave, or when he does leave, it sounds like there's an established culture there, that his philosophy, even see it with the stadium, how the stadium has come on when he's been there, that his legacy will live beyond his spell as manager.
Yeah, definitely. So the new training complex that has been built, that was a lot of his fingerprints on that, because in his first week in charge, he wanted to watch the academy and realized that it was at a different base. And while it's not that far from Melwood, it's still out of his way as a manager to go and watch regularly. And he wanted to know what the thinking behind that was. And one thing about Jürgen, by the way, is he's so clued up on what's happening at other clubs around the world. So he spoke about Salzburg's academy setup and what their base looks like and how cutting edge it is. And he spoke to the owners about why it would make more sense for the first team and the academy to be at one base, why Melwood is great, but facilities can be improved, space can be better used. And so that new complex is one of the legacies he'll leave behind. Another thing he'll leave behind is, I think, just the general culture around the place, where, as I said to you, it is very much a one club, one vision feel, which wasn't the case previously, or not for a long time. Historically, it used to be. But he's brought that back. You spoke about the main stand. That was in progress before his arrival, but Fenway Sports Group could look at this man and think, this is the man to bring us back to where we belong. And so these type of investments, we know that we're going to see a reward for it because we've got the right guy in charge. The Anfield Road development, he's very keen on that, a big advocate for it, because he knows, and he's seen it himself, he's had the benefit of how powerful that Anfield crowd is, and it would make sense to make the ground more accessible to more of them. I think also, just in terms of how Liverpool view themselves and how Liverpool are now viewed externally, because for a long time, they were a punchline to the joke. This season is going to be our season, it's our year, all those kind of things. And And Liverpool had been divorced from reality for a long time, from the fact that they weren't as financially strong and as capable of mixing it with the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas. And he's changed all that. He's shown them that with good coaching, good philosophy, with an alignment in how everyone thinks, and then, yes, topping that up with recruitment, that they can be. So I asked everyone that I spoke to what kind of legacy he'll leave behind. And they all said in 30 years, 40 years from now, people will still be talking about when Jurgen Klopp was Liverpool manager and how you can still feel the benefits of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like you spoke about non-Liverpool fans reading this book, and I just think all football fans are intrigued by Jurgen Klopp, and I'm sure he's a central character in this book. Like even he talked about rockstar football, I think was the term he used to describe the style he was bringing, and to even get professionals engaged with that style of football where it's reliant on 100% pressing all of the time, regardless of the game. I know he's probably tweaked in latter years, and the signing of Thiago would suggest there's going to be more evolution in that. But I think that character, both on and off the field, is so interesting. We should probably talk about Jordan Henderson as well. We could probably talk about Klopp all day, but Jordan Henderson has a fascinating trajectory as well, because Brendan Rodgers, not that there was any falling out or anything, but it was basically a done deal that he's going to Fulham, possibly on loan or in a swap deal with Clint Dempsey. So it just shows what a sliding doors moment that was. Can you just sum up your own, how would you sum up the trajectory of Jordan Henderson's career?
Jordan Henderson, I think, in terms of being the captain to lift the Champions League trophy with Liverpool, and then the captain that lifted the title in their ending their 30-year wait for it, is everything that man deserves as a footballer and as a human being. I have worked across clubs with many, many individuals, and not a lot of them stack up to Jordan Henderson. He is remarkable in how much he cares and how selfless he is to the greater good, whether that be in terms of his teammates, whether that be to the manager, the coaching staff, to the club in general. He has never put himself first. And we talk about the swap deal with Clint Dempsey, which is staggering to think about that now. But you even go further back in his career, and when he was at Sunderland's academy, they were going to cut him because they said he was too skinny, too small. He suffered with a range of different like physical issues, and he had to constantly bash away these question marks that were leveled against him and prove himself over and over and over again, and also reinvent himself in a way. He was quite a skillful player when he was younger at Sunderland, and he will kill me for mentioning this, but there's the Soccer AM skills challenge clip that you can go find of him. I think he's 15 or 16 at the time, and he wins it. And when you look at Jordan Henderson, the player, and you think, what were you doing back then? Like, how could you do all those things with the football? Now he's so disciplined and stuff. But he has persevered through sheer will, determination, an absolute love for football, and an absolute drive to be the very best he can be, looking for all his edges, sitting with the performance analyst to see what he can improve on, what small slight changes he can make with the medical department as well. And you know, when things were at the hardest for him, and you only have to go back 2 seasons again when people were questioning him, saying he shouldn't be captain. When Liverpool signed Virgil van Dijk, the talk was, well, Van Dijk should take over the armband. He's a more natural leader. When you speak to Van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold, all the people that, you know, fans would say would make a better captain, they'd say they don't want anyone rather than Henderson as the captain, because he is the perfect symbol of this Liverpool team.
And was there a turning point in perceptions of him? I know you spoke about his character. That's very interesting that he stacks up in that regard as a character, but presumably there's more to it when you're such an elite team and probably the best team in the world at the moment, that they do look a lesser force when he's not in the side. So how has that perception changed of Jordan Henderson?
I think it's changed in a few respects because of people noticing when he's not there what the team misses. I think when he's there, it's easy to say, well, why isn't Naby Keita playing rather, or why isn't, I don't know, somebody more fancied, or just, I think there's a perception of him that he's just tireless, but he's a lot more than that. He's a very intelligent player and a very tactically astute player. But when he operated as the 6 for Klopp, he had to sacrifice himself so much for the team and learn so much discipline and stuff in that position that now, when he's working as an 8, he's practically still doing 2 jobs. He's still like doing the third man runs, he's still helping with the press, but he's doing so much work for the fullbacks and for the defenders that when he's not there, I think what people have noticed the most is how open the midfield is without him, but also the passing range changes without him. And I don't think people appreciated enough how good he was at finding Mo Salah, Sadio Mane, Roberto Firmino with his, passing ability. They always thought of him just as somebody who's going to help out his teammates or be in the right place, or, something to do with being a workhorse, but not really somebody gifted in the craft. But the biggest thing you lose when Jordan Henderson is not on the pitch is that constant leadership. He is snarling at everyone. He is telling people when to make runs. And there's a very good clip of a goal Sadio Mane scores, and Jordan tells him before the move, Sadio, I'm going to hit, there's space there that I can hit you long, and I need you to make the run. And in the very next stanza of play, Henderson gets the ball, pops it into space for Mane. Mane scores. And I'm so happy that there's a version of that clip that people have found that you can hear Henderson's instructions, because there's a lot of time when he's giving Van Dijk instructions, Trent, Salah, that maybe ordinarily we don't notice. When you think of times when, players are involved with the referee, he's always on it. When you need a little bit of aggression or snarl, I'm remembering the Diego Costa incident, he was involved. So you do miss a lot of natural leadership and the standard setting when he's not on the pitch.
Yeah, and you mentioned his role as a number 6 and how he couples that with moves further up the field. Like Thiago, and having touched on Naby Keita there, is maybe the fan favourite that people wanted to see. Thiago's arrival, given what he did in the Champions League final and his whole career really, how is that going to affect the midfield dynamic, do you think?
Thiago is a very, very interesting signing because he's obviously world class. His pedigree is ridiculous. What he can do with the football, the way he can manipulate it, is just a marvel to watch. But he's unlike anything Liverpool have, and he's unlike anything Liverpool would have ordinarily signed because he doesn't fit their recruitment profile in terms of age, injury history. And so Thiago is a perfect representation of evolution. He is press resistant, but he's also able to open play really well. And so Liverpool are expecting teams to be more obstructive against them. So when they do sit deep, Thiago's the one who can pick spaces, pick pockets, make things happen out of the ordinary. And I think that complemented with that 3 of Fabinho, Henderson, and Wijnaldum that has such great balance is such an extraordinary weapon to have. It also means that Jürgen doesn't really have to rush Thiago's process of adapting to the team because he's got midfielders he can rely on. Then you've also got Naby Keita and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, who, due to injuries and the 3 midfielders I've mentioned, haven't had as much game time previously as they would have wanted. And now they have one of the best midfielders in the world that has joined, which probably means their game time is going to recede further. But it creates this it raises the level again, and it creates competition, and you have to match it, and you have to rise to it, or else you will find yourself out of Liverpool.
Like, to echo that point, people will remember when Fabinho joined for reasonably big money, and he didn't hit the ground running necessarily, in the sense that he wasn't in the first team, and was a little bit of skepticism. But to your point that Thiago can be eased in much like Fabinho was, and he's become an integral part of the side. Like, the two, just from the outside looking in, the two principles I picked out from this book would be Klopp and Henderson, but the team is so much more than that, in the sense that transformative signings you mentioned, Alisson and Van Dijk, really tipped them over the top for Champions League and Premier League success. The fullbacks have been a revelation. The front three are an institution all amongst themselves almost. Like, how would you frame the pecking order in that team, given that it seems to be egoless, and yet there are a lot of stars in the side?
That is the thing I hope that screams out from this book, that with all that talent in the team, and you're talking about the world's best players in that squad, there is no sense of ego. They're so down to earth. They get along extremely well. They're all so plugged into their communities and where they're from. Sadio Mane has built a hospital in Senegal, a school, funds a water project there. His local village has basically been propped up by him. Every infrastructure they have is on account of him. Mo Salah's charity work across Egypt and all over the Middle East is well known. You've got characters like Andy Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold, who are massive advocates and supporters of food banks, both in Liverpool and with Andy Robertson back in Glasgow. And just as we go through, Virgil van Dijk is the coolest defender in the world, the best defender in the world. And yet he'll speak to you like he's your mate from school. It's ridiculous, but I remember as well, he paid for a Christmas party for kids. And I think ordinarily only like 50 kids would have been able to get, like, that's what the budget would have accommodated for. But because of him, like 200 kids could join. And he bought gifts for all of them. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and Perry, his girlfriend from Little Mix, often go to the local charities and spend time with the kids there. So it's a group of men that are very, very talented, very nice to work with, but also very nice people that care and give back. And I think it's no coincidence that they're all like that. When Liverpool recruits, I said earlier that there was a 60-page dossier on Klopp that went well beyond football. They do the same thing with the players. They take a lot of character references. They do recons of training sessions to see how the players treat fans or the other staff, how they're treating the car guards, things like that. And when we think about modern football, there's so much not to like about it. Just, the pay-per-view thing that's come in at them, just as an example. So when you see and when you get the chance to work with such nice people, it does sort of gloss over for a while those bad elements that you dislike. And it does make things enjoyable, because football is incredible to be a part of, to work in, but it's non-stop. It's very long hours, a lot of travel, don't get much time for friends or family. So when you can share the experience with nice people, it's very, very helpful.
And it's kind of nitpicking a little bit, but like Liverpool supporting friends of mine will talk about that front three that we were mentioning there, and it just hums so well, and they have great understanding. But the Mo Salah, Sadio Mane thing, which cropped up a couple of times, that maybe they didn't pass to one another. And when push came to shove, Liverpool fans would tend to tell me that they would pick Mane over Salah, even though Salah has this transcendent talent and was like exceptional that first season and has really kept like really good stats ever since. But is that the only sort of flaw or fly in the ointment you might foresee in the future, where one of them might think, I want to go and play for Real Madrid or Barcelona? Or is that the only possible change in this group?
I think with the front three, there was an acknowledgement after the first season they played together. So like you say, Salah's watershed season, Sadio Mane had already had 2 seasons at Liverpool of proving he was elite. And they both, since that time, have only escalated. Like you say, Salah's numbers are so frightening that he's made it the norm. So now he doesn't get as much credit as he deserves for not just the goals, but the assists. And when it comes to Mane, I don't think there is a more complete forward in world football where you can play him as a false nine, on the left, on the right, and have somebody that is so tenacious and so skilled. So for the longest time, I think there was a feeling that Barcelona might come and take Roberto Firmino, because as the Luis Suarez replacement, he would have made a lot of sense, or as they were trying to, bring the age of the team down. So Liverpool added a clause in his contract when Felipe Coutinho went to avert that from happening. But there's always been the thought that one of the front three might go, or 2 of the front three might go, or actually you're going to get to a point, because they're all aging together, that you do have to, if they don't leave, slowly overhaul it anyway, because you have to bring the age of the team down. You don't want the Barcelona situation where you're having to do so much rebuilding at the same time. And so I think it's a little bit maybe surprising that that none of them have gone yet. I think that's because the setup at Liverpool is so good. On the pitch, off the pitch, they like the staff they work with. Mona Nema, the nutritionist, is very, very popular. She's changed the players' habits dramatically, and they're so appreciative of that. But also, it's not been the right time in world football. So Real Madrid went and got Hazard, for example. Do you go to Barcelona when Messi is still there, because everything's still going to run and revolve around Messi? So it's just not been the right time for any of them. And it's still been the right time at Liverpool. What I do know is that recruitment are very confident that if 1, 2, or whoever leaves, they can comfortably replace them, because I think the Coutinho exit showed that they're very good at letting the star go and then doing what's best for the team in terms of other positions and stuff. I also think at the moment, in terms of forwards, when you look at the talent around Europe's top leagues, the young talent, you look at somebody like Sancho, for example, there's no shortage of options to refresh that front line when the time comes.
Yeah, and that's it's sort of bonus territory for Liverpool. As well as things are going on the pitch, they seem to be so synced in at boardroom level with the recruitment that you're talking about. And even like there's several players we could hone in on, but just the academy products, Trent Alexander-Arnold is probably, or obviously, to the forefront now. And he's an interesting character to get a read on, because he seems quite reserved a little bit in interviews, but then at the same time, he says he wants to reinvent the right back position. So like that's the kind of dichotomy that he has. So like this incredible world-class talent, but we haven't quite got to know Trent Alexander the person. What's your take on him?
So I've done 2 very long interviews with Trent, and I also did his first interview when he just joined the first team. Him and Ben Woodburn together, talking about their pathway from the academy. So I met him first as a very shy kid, but who spoke extraordinarily well. And now I've spoken to him as somebody that was readying for his first Champions League final, and then somebody who had played in back-to-back Champions League finals, won it, and was on the verge of becoming a Premier League winner. So quite a lot happened in a short space of time. And Trent is reserved, yes, especially if he doesn't know you or whatever, his guard is up, but he is fiercely competitive. That kid, the reason why he is where he is and is as successful as he is, and is part of such a phenomenal team at his age, is because of that attitude. He hates losing, and he hates anything that's gone wrong in his game, whether he was caught out of position. And I think the thing we forget, Trent and Joe Gomez get a lot of criticism because opposition teams target Liverpool's right. The alternative for opposition teams is to target Virgil van Dijk. So of course they're going to go down the right. It makes sense. So that side is always working overtime. And actually, if you look at his ability from right, Liverpool in effect have a midfielder with a sort of range. I don't want to say he's like Kevin De Bruyne, because in my opinion, Kevin De Bruyne is the best midfielder in the world at the moment, probably, and the best player in the league. But he gives you that ability to dictate the game from a right back position. And it's scary to think he is in that position, probably the best or one of the best top 3 right backs in the world at the moment, had never played it. And only a few months before he joined the first team, the academy thought the quickest pathway would be right back, and would keep him behind for training sessions where they just get the fastest wingers in the academy to go one-on-one at him over and over and over again. And he said he used to be miserable. He used to hate those training sessions. But what it did was it made him so angry that he was like, you think you're getting past me? Show me how you're getting past me. So he learned to remove his petulance and sort of meet the challenge and exceed any expectation of him, because towards the end of this process of teaching him how to be a right back, it was impossible to beat him. And then actually what would happen is the wingers would have to spend so much time trying to let him not have space to dictate play.
And his baptism of fire, I think he made his debut at Old Trafford, or certainly one of his first games. Like, that kind of spoke to the faith that Klopp had in him. And much like Klopp, and as I alluded to earlier, there's nothing to suggest that Trent is going anywhere. He could be a career club or club man. There's nothing to suggest he won't be. Do you think he is going to be a right back for his entire career, Melissa, or can you see him reverting to his customary old midfield position?
When I spoke to him about that, he said at the moment he's one of the best right backs in the world, and he can be the best right back in the world. And why wouldn't you want to be the best right back in the world? And why would you think of something that isn't really on the table at the moment? I think we all have the midfield thing in our heads because he did play midfield. He was a very good midfielder for the academy. He definitely has the range of a midfielder. He plays right back like a midfielder. But why would we want to move him there if he's giving you that offensive threat from fullback? And look at Liverpool's array of talent in midfield. Already it's going to be so hard for people to break in there. So why would you also want him to be involved in that mix? Maybe one day, if it makes sense for him and the team. I think it's definitely within his capabilities to be able to do it and do it very well. I just think at the moment we're seeing across modern football, actually, the importance of fullbacks. And Pep Guardiola and Jürgen Klopp have been advocates for a long time in how that's an underrated area of the pitch. And I think Andy Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold have proved them correct.
As much as football has become quite commercial and the fees are astronomical, the importance of having homegrown talent in these teams is so important, especially to the Liverpool community. I know you're very tapped into that community, and they appreciate, like Steven Gerrard was such a totemic figure for them, and the fact that he never got to win the title How important was it that Trent was there, this symbol of Liverpool City, when they finally got to lift that Premier League title?
It was so important, not just in terms of Trent and in terms of him having that moment, him, being immersed in the club, growing up a few minutes away from Melwood, watching the Champions League parade go past his house in 2005, having worked with Steven Gerrard at the academy, so come all this way through. That journey that is so rare these days, it's important to still see it's happening, to know that it's possible. But also for all the little kids around Liverpool, all the Scousers that, wanted to be Steven Gerrard, they now have a new person to model themselves on. They can model themselves on Trent Alexander-Arnold and know that you can push towards your dreams, whatever it may be, and you can achieve it. When he won the Champions League, his quote immediately afterwards was, "I'm just a normal lad from Liverpool, and my dreams have just come true," which is actually on a mural by Anfield. And when Liverpool won the league at Formby Hall, he has shades on, and he's got a champion's scarf, and he's absolutely unable to contain his emotions, because one of the things he said was, this is not about him, like his family, his mom, his dad, his brothers who had to sacrifice their own dreams of becoming a footballer, so everything could be channeled towards him because he had the best chance, and all their lives being practically geared so that he can become successful, all the sacrifices and decisions his parents have had to make. And then he said, on a wider sense, the fact that he knows he's not just representing his family, but Liverpool as a city, and he's so proud to be from this place. And there's so many good stories, feel-good stories in what Liverpool managed to achieve, and he was definitely one of them.
And that conveyor belt seems to be going. Curtis Jones and Nico Williams, I know Klopp speaks in glowing terms about those, and the bar is high. Like Trent is in there on merit, and so are those two. We've seen Ryan Brewster, who was very acclaimed, has moved on, possibly temporarily, but he's gone on a permanent basis for now. And even Harry Wilson looks like he might not cut it at first team level quite yet. But before we move off the book, Melissa, you mentioned all the feel-good stories. Is there anything else people should be looking out for in this book beyond what we've touched on so far?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of understanding of how big decisions are made at the club in terms of the relationship between Jürgen Klopp, Michael Edwards, and Mike Gordon. There's a lot of detail on those two men who hardly speak, but none of what Liverpool have achieved would have been possible without those two either. So it goes into a lot of detail about them and how on a daily basis they operate with Klopp to arrive at huge things, whether it be the signing of Thiago or the Anfield Road extension and how that progresses and such. There's also a lot of myth busting on many aspects, I think, of when, players have received criticism if the manager gave up on them, or he speaks to one of the points you alluded to earlier, his ability to drown out the external noise, to not care about the criticism or what people are writing and saying. I think that comes across in the book because he goes from the start and talks about all the moments that people doubted or poked at or couldn't understand, and how it was so important to stay true to what he was working towards. You mentioned the West Brom game, the 2-2 draw, when he walked over to the Kop, and how that was derided, but look at how that worked out in the end. So what I think you will also understand pretty early is how he's been working to a big picture in his head, and how regardless of what happened, whether it be the major losses in finals or such, he's never deviated from that big picture, which is how it's been able to materialize.
it's going to be a fascinating season, and that's a fascinating book that people can see on screen there. It's entitled Believe Us, How Jurgen Klopp Transformed Liverpool into Title Winners. The author is Melissa Reddy from The Independent. Thanks so much, Melissa, for your time.
Thank you. That sounds so good to hear, by the way.